Welcome to another episode of the MacGuffin Podcast, the movie review podcast that dreams are made of. Keith Foster, you are green in San Diego, California.
That's right. I'm just getting the Halloween vibes ready. Cassidy Robinson, you are recording from an undisclosed location in the Rocky Mountains.
I just think you had backlight envy going on.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you clearly have poster envy.
Yes, it's true. I started hanging a little bit more back there. I brought one of the ones from my living room into the room, so I had something that people could look at if they decide to watch these videos on youtube.com, MacGuffin Pod, where you can watch the video version of the podcast. Today we're going to be recording an episode doing reviews for Totally Killer, the Amazon Prime original sci-fi horror comedy. And for our streaming homework, we're going to be doing the movie Possession from 1981. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I might not have a lot to say. It left me kind of speechless.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that I at least had 24 hours to sit on it, but I probably need
Yeah.
much more than that. But just as a brain teaser, something to get our cylinders firing, we're going to do a classic game. Andy Cohen would be proud. Fuck, Marry, Kill, Halloween style. The crazy ladies of Stephen King universe. Fuck, Marry, Kill. Margaret White from Carrie. Annie Wilkes from Misery. And Mrs.
Okay.
Carmody from The Mist.
Kill Mrs. Carmody. Easily. Fuck Carrie's mom, because she's got some pent up repression, and marry Annie. She's a sweetie as long as you do exactly what she wants.
I mean, it is hinted at. I've never read the book, but it is hinted in the movie that she may have killed her previous husband and fed him to the pig.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
I mean, she's very resourceful.
Yeah.
She's a nurse.
She's
technically
an independent lady. There's nothing wrong with that. And as long as you respect that and respect her,
and
you'll be fine.
Are very into her interests.
Yeah.
That would be very important.
Sure. But yeah, I think that's my order. What about you? Fuck, marry, kill.
You know, I have to. I'm trying to preserve my life mostly in this situation.
No. I mean,
because
come on, no, that's not happening. Like
all three of them are super crazy and definitely capable of murder. But yeah, I think my order is the same. You got Margaret White. By the way, R.I.P. Piper Laurie, who just recently passed away.
Oh, that's too bad.
She played Margaret White in the original Carrie. Chewed it to pieces. She was also a reoccurring character in Twin Peaks. I think the last thing I remember seeing her in was that Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie Hesher. But yes, definitely go back at the very least, watch the original Carrie, watch her in Twin Peaks. She's terrific. But yes, I mean, obviously, you get her a little whiskey drunk, and she's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that, that's the name of the game, right?
That is the name of the game. And again, this is more about self-preservation than anything else. Yes, Annie Wilkes is the most resourceful. She can take care of a farm, her home. She's a nurse. I think you're playing with fire with that one. Now,
Oh, absolutely.
as far as we know, Mrs. Carmody had never done anything violent
That's true.
prior
We
to the events of the mist.
and the it is
I mean,
a
she's not a good
pretty
person.
stressful situation.
Yeah, she's clearly not a good person. She's clearly insane. All three of them are some level of zealotry going on. Her
Hmm.
probably the most. Uh,
I feel like, but nobody still liked her in the mist. Like, even though she wasn't like fully like cult leader, child killer yet, like everybody in the store still didn't like her before all of that.
right, she was kind of seen as the town crank.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I almost kind of
She's just
feel
not a
I
she's just
feel a
not
little
like
mean saying kill Miss Carmody because until there's giant monsters attacking your home, I think she would probably be fine, other than being just generally unpleasant.
yeah, and she's just too intense and like, you can't have a laugh with her.
No, super gaslighty.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we're just going on self-preservation, I think I'm gonna make a switcheroo. I think I'm gonna kill Annie Wilkes because she's for sure gonna do something to you. Whether
Coward.
she knocks your ankles out with a sledgehammer or tries to feed you to her pig, uh, yeah, it's not something bad is going to happen. Whereas with Mrs. Carmody, as long as everything is okay with the world around you and you can escape and go take a weekend or something, I think you'll at the very least live.
All right. I can see your logic there, but I'm sticking with my answers.
Okay, there you have it. If anybody has any other opinions on your fuck Mary kill of these three individuals, please share your thoughts on social media at MacGuffinPod, Twitter and Instagram. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the first review, Totally Killer. And I'll let you set that up. What happens in this film?
Uh Totally Killer is it's about this small town slasher killer, the Sweet 16 killer who murdered three girls back in the 80s and then returns years later to finish off the last of the friend group. Kiernan Shipka's mother, she through shenanigans inadvertently travels back in time and has an opportunity to try and stop the Sweet 16 killer from killing everybody.
Yeah. So that kind of like threw me off a little bit. Just like suddenly time travel is introduced into the plot. Essentially, yeah, they're not shy at all about making the comparisons that this is sort of a slasher killer comedy meets like a Back to the Future style narrative where she goes
Yeah,
back to the
they
80s. She ends up running into her parents and they talk
mhm.
about time paradoxes and things like that. She has to make sure things happen a certain way. And she's always sort of the stakes being different rather than trying to, get to the clock tower on time. She's chasing a killer to try and stop the kills before they happen.
Mhm.
And I think the comedy sort of comes from a little bit of a intergenerational fish out of water thing where she finds out that her parents were kind of the bullies. Uh,
Well, and just the kind of like teen culture war of, a Gen Z versus a Gen Xer.
right. Yeah. Where everything was a lot less politically correct and a lot less uh, sensitive in general.
Hmm.
And they maybe overplay that hand a little bit here or there. Um, After like the 15th time she makes a "this is problematic" joke, it's like, okay, like we understand, you've been on the earth long enough to know that there was a world before you existed in it. Like, you, at some point, you have to try to assimilate here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. And like most of I thought the funniest jokes weren't when she would see something and be like, "Oh, well that's problematic or whatever." Uh but just the kind of like I thought the funniest jokes was just sort of her interacting with the people in this time. Like instead of,
mm,
seeing, a Indian mascot on their high school, uh, and rolling her eyes at it. It's funnier when you see this guy who's just this big old jock, uh, acting like the douchiest. I got a lot more mileage out of those gags
mm.
than the sort of intergenerational jokes. I agree. I think they maybe hit that note a little too much for my taste.
I also like the idea that, just generally speaking, people were way less safe and way more careless about things. Like,
Yeah.
she tries to find certain people, and she's like, "I know this is probably classified information, but what class was so and so in?" And the counselor's like, "Oh, it's this class right here."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought those were the funnier jokes of actually seeing her sort of interact with these ideas versus just sort of rolling her eyes at them.
Right, and I love the conversations between her and her mother,
Yeah,
her
I
teenage
also
mother, and
yeah, I also thought that was a good source of the comedy. Like, she's only known her mom as this like sort of
overprotective.
stereotypical house mom,
Right.
and to see her be like a teenage bully, I thought was a lot of fun.
Right, and essentially her mother is in a group called the Mollies, which is very similar to like the Heathers.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a bit of that kind of satire in the movie as well, although not nearly as dark. Um, I think as far as the science fiction plot goes, I could have used way less self-referential, "Oh, this is just like Back to the Future" jokes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like, it got to the point where it was less like Back to the Future and a bit more like Rick and Morty, where it was like self-referential just for the sake thereof.
Well, also like I feel like the time travel element was a little convoluted, and there's a lot of sort
Shoots
of
and ladders.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and did you ever see Freaky?
No. That
So
came
I
out last year, right?
Yeah, and it's a similar tone, it's Vince Vaughn is like the serial killer, and then he through this like ancient cursed knife or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like does a Freaky Friday, and they switch bodies. And I kind of liked how that addressed that sort of high concept more, because they didn't need to sort of use as much time with it. It was like, oh, this is just sort of this cursed dagger. I feel like maybe if it just felt like a lot on top of a lot. Because there's this sort of killer mystery. Then there's the fish out of water stuff, and then there's also this sort of sci-fi comedy stuff, and to me the sci-fi stuff is where the movie fell the shortest.
Well,
It,
that's where it's the most plot heavy.
yeah, and it just required the most explaining and the most, and they were just kind of, it just felt like they kind of got hung up on that a little bit too much for my taste. Um, like,
Yeah,
the I felt like sort of the whole first 10-15 minutes of this movie is just all expository dialogue, like explaining the world and like explaining who these characters are, and then they have to go and explain that, oh, time travel's real, and it feels clunky. It felt like they're, like, we want to see her back in time. That's where the juice of the movie is. And, for her friend to just sort of happen to have a time machine, it just felt like kind of the movie was getting in its own way a bit.
yeah, I would have been just as happy, or I think it might have been a cleaner kind of storytelling trope if, like, that amethyst crystal that her mother gave her,
Yeah,
like, for some
exactly.
reason was like witchcraft or something, and it sent her back in time.
I think that might have felt a little more on theme too, right? Because all
Mm.
the sci-fi and the comedy, I get that it's not trying to be very horror, but it whatever horror edge it has is definitely diluted through all of these genres, and you can just tell they were the least interested in it being actually scary.
Yeah, it reminded me a bit of the movie Happy Death Day,
Hmm.
which both of these movies were sort of high concept deconstructions of the teen horror slasher through, like, the a certain sort of sci-fi element or
Yeah, Freaky
otherworldly
was
element.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the case of Happy Death Day, it was a lot cleaner and it was a lot more economic storytelling wise because they didn't have to figure out a mechanical way that the person kept reliving the same day, a la Groundhog's Day style.
Yeah,
It just was happening.
I feel like this sort of meta, high concept horror movie is starting to become diminishing returns for me. Because, like, again, I keep bringing up Freaky because it's very similar in tone, but it wasn't afraid to also be a convincing slasher movie, right? Like,
Mm.
there's some pretty brutal deaths in it, and there's some, like, when it comes to do that, they don't, it fully sort of embraces the genre, and I felt like this kind of felt like it was kind of skirting around it. Like, it wasn't really interested in being too much of a slasher.
No, I mean it's definitely pop horror at its poppiest.
Hmm.
It is geared toward a more sort of younger teenage audience, and that's fine. I think
Yeah.
Happy Death Day was sort of that way too, with the PG-13 horror. This is R, but barely. Yeah, I think ultimately the problem is you have a hat on a hat on a hat plot wise. Like they just had a hard time kind of writing themselves out of corners.
Yeah, yeah. And, I also just wanted to see more of the sort of back and forth of the characters, because once we actually start to get to know them, that's when the movie becomes a lot more fun. And that's when, but, and then these characters start dying off, and it just feels like you said, you hat on a hat on a hat. And I feel like the third act, uh, kind of stumbles at the finish line as well, because it's got to sort of resolve all of this stuff. It's got to resolve who the killer is and get her back, in time, and it just, it was a little much, I thought.
Yeah, yeah. It's not perfect. I think it's perfectly watchable. Like
Yeah, I
there's
mean, it was
it's
fun enough.
I had a good time watching it. It went down pretty easy. I think that the lead here, Kiernan Shipka,
Hmm.
most people probably know her as Sabrina, the new Sabrina, or she was in Mad Men. She's really good.
Hmm.
And all of the other teen cast members who play in the 80s stuff, they're a lot of fun to watch. And they have some fun with some cliches. And other times it's a bit more like we're going to do the cliche, but it's not a cliche because we're commenting that it's a cliche. And trying that circular reasoning doesn't always pay off. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had a decent enough time with it. It's fluffy, it's light, it's whatever. I'd give it like a C plus.
Yeah, I think that's sounds right. Yeah, I would agree. C plus, it's fun enough, but I didn't get a ton out of it. And,
Mm,
I'm not going to need to watch it again anytime soon, but it's fine.
yeah, especially for streaming content. Oh, I will
Yeah.
say there was one element that really threw me out of the movie a lot. The camera was often using like these like wide
Oh,
angle
yeah, the weird
panorama
like fisheye
shots.
lens.
Yeah, and then it would try and move. Like if it wasn't centered directly, it would, and they tried to like move the camera with the wrong lens on it. It just all of
Yeah.
a sudden you were very aware that you were watching a movie.
Yeah, I thought that was an odd choice as well. Yeah, I noticed that too.
If you're gonna, you know, do a whip pan or something like that, you can't use a wide angle lens. So
Yeah.
okay, let's go ahead and move on to your first segment. You prepared the segment this week, so go ahead and explain it to us.
So I wanted to I challenged you to come up with three types of horror movie monsters or tropes that we feel are underrepresented in movies right now. Um, yeah, I think we did a segment like this similar to this a while ago. So I wanted to put a moratorium on like the big obvious monsters. So no like vampires or werewolves or Frankensteins or zombies, things like that. Um, but like what kinds of movie monsters do you think we don't see enough of, or maybe we just haven't seen in a while?
Okay, cool. I
And then I also told you you could think of it as like a movie pitch too, if you wanted.
I don't have anything that detailed exactly, but I do have. I kind of went more into the mythological, into the folkloric,
Okay.
and cryptozoological worlds
Okay. All
to sort
right.
of
We
pull
we
from.
I wonder if we're gonna have some similar answers here.
I don't know. Um, for my first one, I am going to pick goblins.
Okay. All right.
You know, we've seen goblins in sort of like fantasy, specifically like Harry Potter or Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings, whatever, but never like the folkloric zombie or goblins. Specifically,
Sure.
while I was reading about it, I I ran across this folklore story of this goblin called Red Hat,
Oh
who
yeah, red hats are cool.
you know about Red Hat.
I know
Okay.
about red hats. They're the little or red caps, and they got like these little like gnome caps, and don't they have like sides and they're like cut your ankles and stuff?
Yeah, and the reason their caps are red is because they're soaked in the blood of their victims.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
now, when you start to research too much into certain things, you realize how much of like these cryptozoological or folklore traditions kind of like lead back to anti-Semitic tropes. So we're not going to do that.
No. Yeah.
But um, but I think that we've never gotten a goblin movie where the goblin is meant to be scary and not just like a fantasy mission on the way to something else.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I think you know, the closest we get to that is like with trolls. There's, there tend to be a lot more trolls because maybe
Mm,
they're a little bit bigger. But yeah, I'm totally down with goblins. I have an answer that's very similar. But uh I'll save that for my last pick.
okay.
My first pick is a Bigfoot. Now,
Okay.
there hasn't really been any good attempts to try and make like a good scary Bigfoot movie, right? Like you see a bunch of like, direct to streaming schlock or direct to DVD stuff that's just like killer Bigfoot and just really generic and dumb looking. And I think it would be very cool to have like a Blair Witch meets Friday the 13th with Bigfoot. These campers stumble across a Bigfoot. Like that would be a very scary situation. And the myth of Bigfoot is like he's such a well-known creature that it surprises me that there hasn't been like an earnest take on Bigfoot and try to just really make it as scary as possible. Couldn't even really think of any good Bigfoot movies except for like Harry and the Hendersons.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The other angle besides like direct to DVD schlock is usually
Is
comedy.
hmm Yeah, like
Um,
there's a Bigfoot in a Goofy movie and
right.
Harry and the Hendersons. Like, yeah, it's usually kind of just played off as a joke. And I think there's
And then
enough.
there's all the animated movies, all the animated Big Feet and Little Feet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't even think about
Yeah.
those. Like, yeah, Zendaya is Michi.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Mm,
I would love to see someone just like really go for, and you could do it, fairly low budget, and
mm,
I think it could be very, if it's directed well, very effective.
yeah. I mean, I think that's why everybody is a little afraid to approach it, is because it's so ingrained in pop culture as being sort of a hokey,
Yeah.
uh, paranormal researchy kind of thing that nobody really takes it that seriously.
Yeah, there's too many TLC Bigfoot hunt, the hunt for Bigfoot type shows
Mm-hmm.
and it's the people who believe in Bigfoot are often just kind of written off as like a freak show type thing. And that's what I think makes it so sort of ripe for a genuine treatment.
Mm.
Let's take Bigfoot back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down. Now, would you want it to be more sort of like a traditional Pacific Northwestern Bigfoot? Or would you think like skunk ape, abominable snowman?
Oh, I could go for
Mhm.
whatever. I would say maybe avoid like an abominable snowman or a yeti. Um, I would prefer something a little more, you know, uh,
Green
brown.
forest.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to really hit home the Bigfoot vibes. It could be like a pine forest during the winter or whatever. But in my mind, I'm picturing like a group of kids camping, and yeah, I just think that leads itself more to like the Pacific Northwest. But I'd take a skunk ape.
Yeah. All right. My next pick is the Thunderbird.
Oh, cool.
Have you ever seen that photo it was taken
Probably.
it was taken or doctored or whatever
Hmm.
in like the early 1900s or late 1800s, like flash photography, and it shows like this tribe of natives holding up what looks to be a dead thunderbird or like
Hmm.
a pterodon maybe with feathers.
Yeah, I think I have. This sounds familiar. I'm sure if I saw it, I would go, yeah, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's Googleable, you can find it,
Yeah.
but it sort of activates the imagination to see that. And obviously, it was a myth that was very popular, not just amongst the Native Americans, but going all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Rome. Many different cultures have something like it. A lot of
Hmm.
the Mesoamerican cultures have something similar to the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
And I think you could go one or two ways with this. You could go sincere, make a really scary movie about this giant ass pterodon slash bird that just can swoop down and kill anybody. Maybe set it in the past before there's like guns and rifles and things.
Hmm.
Um, or you could play it more sort of like the Tremors treatment and make it a little bit more light, make it a little bit more like uh, this this relic from the past interrupting modern day society.
Hmm. Yeah,
Either
I
way,
think,
could be cool.
yeah. Also, it's hard to do. I think it's a challenge to do sky monsters just in
Mm-hmm.
general, because generally speaking, you're just going to need a lot more effects shots, and it also presents some challenges in the way things are going to be filmed, and I think that could be really cool. We saw Jordan Peele very successfully, I think, did that recently with Nope, but I think it is hard to do sort of a flying monster.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want to be in the clouds with it too much.
Hmm.
I would, especially if you're going for scary, I would I would play it more like Tremors in that you show it as little as possible, or just
Yeah.
kind of show the damage it can do, and then save those money shots for when you really need them, and then use practicals as much as possible. That
Oh
goes
yeah.
without saying for anything that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I wouldn't want to see some stupid rubbery looking CGI thing just flying everywhere.
Yeah. No, that's not going to be scary at all. Okay, my next pick is uh, evil genies, specifically evil genies.
The
I
gin,
feel like, yes,
yeah.
I am a sucker for like the sort of ironic wish fulfillment, and that kind of got played out as a trope, in the 80s. And then once people sort of became aware of that, then we started to get stuff like Bedazzled, um, and sort of more comedic takes on it, and then up to most recently, Thousand Years of Longing, which was a romance. And I think, let's bring back the evil genie. Let's bring back the be careful what you wish for uh, type of thing. Probably not reboot the Wishmaster franchise, but something along those lines. I think
Yeah.
it could be really cool and really scary. I think genies are so sort of fantastical and otherworldly that you could do a lot of cool stuff, and there's plenty of room for artistic interpretation there.
Yeah. I think it's a if nothing else, people should read more about the origins of the genie or the jinn,
Yeah.
and Uh, it's kind of like mermaids. Like mermaids are like ever since Disney, everything sort of gets filtered through Disney and
Yeah.
ends up becoming like your best friend. But
Yeah.
if you go back far enough to their origins, are a lot more sort of these terrifying creatures.
And
Um,
they're always like their goal is to trick you and to get you to kill yourself. Like
mhm.
yeah, I think, they're, and I think there's something interesting there with genies specifically because they're typically portrayed as this sort of servant, uh, and I think that adds an interesting dynamic to the horror of, this sort of, you're dealing with this cosmic entity and you just have to be so careful and specific, otherwise it will find a way to completely fuck you.
Yeah, that whole monkey spa
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Um, yeah, I would be down for that. I think that would be really cool. And would you set it in current times or like in classic Arabian folklore kind of?
Um, I this one I was had less specific of a pitch. I just think it'd be cool to see. Um, yeah, I almost think, something like Thousand Years of Longing, where it's almost a series of vignettes, could be really cool. And you could sort of progress through time and maybe see the destruction caused by the jinn.
Mm, yeah. Let's see. What do I want to pick last? I think last I'm going to go with Changeling.
Oh, okay. I almost thought about this. Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the film, the George C. Scott ghost film, The Changeling,
Hmm.
which is very much sort of a straightforward haunted house gothic horror tale. And I'm not talking about that Angelina Jolie movie where her son comes back or whatever,
Hmm.
that Clint Eastwood directed. There is an actual myth that word is based on of uh, a type of fairy. It's sort of mixed between a goblin and a fairy. It's sort of
Hmm.
demonic looking creature that replaces your child, and it's similar enough that you're never sure, but you notice over time or longer and longer that this is not your child.
Hmm.
And I think that there's something so psychologically terrifying about that you could have a lot of fun with it. And
Yeah.
I think it could be, if done well, a really scary movie.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely something there, and you could play with the sort of evil child genre in a way that, it beyond just sort of they're possessed by the devil or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, that would be really cool. I think again, I think Jordan Peele had some elements of a changeling story in the
Us,
movie
yeah.
Us, yeah. But it would be cool to see just like that be the full sort of concept. You could, like you said, could be very psychological with it. Could, almost be like Rosemary's Baby meets The Omen meets something else.
Yeah, there's been this trend lately, especially in like the A24 horror films of this the destruction of the American family
Hmm.
is sort of this common theme that sort of runs across all of them. Or this idea that the traditional family unit is is no longer this stability that people can count on anymore. And I think you could play right into that sort of
Totally.
trend with a Changeling story. And,
Dude, give
you
me
know,
this script tomorrow. Like, let's do it. I love this. Yeah.
all right, cool.
And okay, my last one, which was similar to Goblins, but I'm still putting in a different category. Now, I'm going to say this. I want you to understand that I don't mean literally this creature. This is more of a trope. But gremlin type, like little monster people, right? Like, I get why you can't do gremlins because gremlins, the name is just so attached to the Joe Dante film.
Mm.
But I love movies with mischievous little guys running around, fucking shit up, and like they're pests, but they're monsters. There was a slew of these in the '80s. Uh, so many Gremlin ripoffs with like Ghoulies and Critters um, and I think that is a genre
Munchies.
that yeah, I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
genre that I think would be fun to kind of bring back. I think the most recent example I could think of was, um, oh, what was that movie called? The Guillermo del Toro didn't direct it, but he produced it with the little rat people. Was it Don't Speak? Something like
No.
that.
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which was a remake in and of itself of a TV movie from the 70s.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, don't be. I just like that was the last one, and that was like a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
I love little critters and monsters running around fucking shit up. And you know
So what you're
that.
really saying is you want a return of the wet puppets era.
I mean, yes, always. I mean, every movie should have more wet puppets. Just cover the latex and KY jelly and yeah. But I also was thinking like of a let's take kind of a modern take on it as well, right? Like a lot of people, it's not a secret that there is a crazy housing crisis going on for our generation and younger, where increasingly it's harder and harder to afford a home. So more and more you get these sort of situations of people living with roommates and living in these sort of cheaper affordable housing apartments and stuff like that. And so I think it would be cool to have like an apartment building that's infested by little monsters and just kind of like Attack the Block or
Chud.
yeah, setting it all in this sort of one kind of tenement house I think could be a lot of fun.
I mean, I would watch that movie. I wouldn't say that we're starved for that kind of movie or that sort of representation because there was a heyday of it, like the when the Chiodos brothers were making everything.
Oh, I
But
mean, you're right. I want to kind of bring it back. I miss
yeah,
that sort of fun, mischievous horror. It's different from straight up horror comedy. Like a lot of them were horror comedies, but it's almost kind of its own genre at this point.
all right. Let's go ahead and talk about the streaming homework, and that is the Andrei Zawalski's Possession from 1981.
Before you set this up, how much about this movie did you know about going into it?
Not much. I knew that it was controversial. I knew that it was that it was nominated for a Palme d'Or, and that Isabelle Adjani won Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival that year. But I The film did not. I knew Sam Neill was in it.
But you didn't know a lot of the story
I didn't
details.
know any of the story beats, no, other
Okay.
than I had watched a review from Mark Kermode a long time ago, back in like 2009. He reviewed on his radio program the movie Antichrist, Lars von Trier's Antichrist, and he had compared that movie favorably to Possession,
I see. Okay. All right.
which is gives maybe some people an idea if you've seen Antichrist. Um,
Yeah. So what is Possession about?
so Sam Neill plays a spy, I guess. Which that didn't read to me until I was reading the plot details later. But he plays a spy
Mhm.
who just returned back home, and having been away for a while, he suspects that his wife has been cheating, and their marriage sort of comes to a head, and they decide to take some time apart. He leaves their only son with her while he goes to work for a little bit longer. He comes back and finds that not only has she not been taking care of her son, she's not been taking care of the apartment. It's like destroyed, the loft that they live in, and the son is covered in mess, and hasn't been taking care of himself, and she seems to be sort of uh, obsessed with something. She's bothered, and at that point, they decide to separate, and he hires a private detective to follow her and figure out what she's doing while he's away. And his paranoias sort of become confirmed, question mark, that there's something more diabolical going on. You know, now
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
describe the movie any which way. You can, lay out the plot points, blah blah blah. But the what the movie is doing is very different than what the movie is.
Yeah.
Because this is
Yeah.
entirely a tone piece, a mood piece, and it's more about
Well,
this
it's more about
delirium.
putting the viewer in to the headspace of this sort of extremely tumultuous divorce. It's all about getting you to feel those feelings, uh and I kind of knew that going into it. Like I knew, really it wasn't until the sort of third act that I started going, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, the director sort of holds its cards closely in terms of the reveals
Yeah.
of what is or what isn't supernatural. And even then, I think you could read the film literally or you could read the film metaphorically, and it kind of works either way. If you decide to watch it as a horror film, if you're there for viscera, you get that.
Yeah,
But
surprisingly, that I was kind of not expecting all the gross stuff.
right. But if you're watching the film more as a sort of psychodrama, which is more the way I sort of took it, I think the movie to me has to do with the fragility of the male ego, and
No, totally.
jealousy and rage, and how these manifest. And you know the sort of the, the movie's called Possession, which is almost sort of does it a disservice, because that's you know probably a more marketable word, but that's not really the type of film that it is, or isn't a. This isn't like a in the
Well, it's
tradition of
not
The
a
Exorcist
Yeah,
little
it's
girl.
not a literal sort. Well, yeah, it's not like a literal demon from hell kind of, what the sort of Western idea of possession has become.
Right.
Um, but I actually kind of love the title because I think it works on a lot of levels. Like immediately I was like, oh, possession, this isn't a demon movie. Like it's literally referring to Sam Neill treating her like a possession, like an object. Like, she
Oh,
has
that's
no
interesting.
agency. She has no, he possesses her. And then again, in the third act, you realize that there is maybe more of a supernatural, uh, kind of literal idea of possession as well. So I actually ended up really liking the title.
Yeah, and I think that there's this physicality to everything. Like
Yeah.
uh, everything from the performances, which are like screeching histrionics throughout the whole film. Like everybody is almost kabuki level uh mannered in their the way they perform, and
Hmm.
is Isabelle Ijani especially
Yeah.
in that role. She really kind of goes somewhere else with it, and it's hard, it's kind of hard to decode what's press and what's hype and what's real and whatever. But apparently, this was a hard movie for her to shake after doing it.
I I mean, I can see that. Like I could see any of them. Like it's the only it's visceral. Like like you feel it in your guts.
Yeah,
And so much of the way it was filmed leads into that. Like you're talking about the physicality. Like everybody's sort of gaunt and pale and almost, and everybody's like they're constantly staying in the same clothes for like days at a time, and you see the sweat piling up and the stains, and like there's just a tactile sort of nastiness to this movie.
right. And often with these very minimally lit and uh minimally decorated sets. Like there's not a lot. This is he's a Polish filmmaker. He started making films like both before and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the
Hmm.
film takes place in Berlin. There's something very European about the
Yeah.
look and feel of the movie. I believe this is his only English language film, but yeah, and then on top of it, you have this like steady cam work where he'll do these long takes with the
Yeah.
actors while they're rather than like traditional blocking and setting up sort of how the scene work is going to play. It almost feels like the camera is dancing with the actors in
Yeah,
this
it
panoramic
almost
sort of way.
it also it feels almost improvisational, the
Mm-hmm.
performances, because it's not so script heavy or dialogue focused. um that it feels like these setups were kind of like, okay, here's the basic idea of the scene, now just fucking freak out at each other for 10 minutes and cut.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the movie as it progresses becomes more and more disorienting, both
Hmm.
in the way that it's filmed and also in the editing, and the a lot of the where they decide to cut the scene and begin the next scene. You don't know, like, are we seeing something that already happened as a memory, or are we,
Yeah.
or is this a flash forward, flash back, or a different perspective, or
Yeah, there's especially early on, there's a lot of this sort of disjointed editing that
mm,
again, it led me, the movie kind of led me astray, in that I thought it might even have more of like a Shining like quality with Sam Neill's character. Like I was sort of the way his reality is presented uh, in the beginning of the film, purposely disjointed and unreliable. And
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of shifts as he makes himself more comfortable back at home. uh it, he becomes a little bit more reliable, and instead she's thrown into chaos. It's really interesting the way the perspective of the sort of madness shifts.
Right. And this idea of, you know, this extended metaphor of divorce.
Yeah.
Um, and the movie was also, I think, compared to The Brood a lot when it
Oh
came
yeah, I can
out.
see that.
That movie is a lot. The Brood is a lot more Cronenbergian in the sense that
Yeah.
it's all it's all cerebral, and it's kind of looking at things and making them physical, but doing so from this sort of analytical point of view. Whereas this
Yeah,
movie is all feeling. It's all about
yeah.
the
The
rage,
the
the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly, totally. And I feel like the Brood kind of lays its cards on the table a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I think it's just a little more clinical of an approach. And yeah, this is all just about, it's a mood piece. It's just get the audience in the headspace of total chaos.
Yes, and I think that the more and more disorienting it becomes, and the more and more histrionic and and out of this world it becomes,
Yeah.
the more I found myself playing this interesting game with the movie of like, how much do I invest in any
Mhm.
given narrative? You know,
Sure. Yeah.
how much should I be trying to solve in an analytical way, and or how much should I just let wash over me? And I think ultimately that is the most forgiving way to watch the movie, is to try to experience the emotion of it rather than
Mhm.
trying to figure it out literally, because I don't think there's anything literal about the movie.
I I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on that. I think there is and isn't. And I don't know. I would probably need to watch it more if I decided I want to try and figure out what was, sort of real. But I don't think it's necessary.
No.
Um, and I think yeah, the best way to approach it is to just sort of experience it, just like you said, let it sort of wash over you, and just try to be in each scene, in each moment as it's sort of happening.
Yeah, I mean, I found it, when it was said and done, I had mixed emotions while watching it, but when it was said and done, it was very upsetting and and so disorienting that I wasn't even able to approach my feelings towards it in terms of, did it tick these boxes or whatever. Like it
Mhm.
was it was yeah, a genuinely upsetting movie. And
Yeah.
I would say its closest relative is Lars von Trier's Antichrist. That it's certainly, this is a movie he studied while watching or while creating his film. But I think you can see in the tone and the mood of the movie and the style, um, there were elements that reminded me a lot of the first Hellraiser. Um,
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
if you were to take things more literally and just kind of like go full on horror with it. Or I think a lot of Darren Aronofsky's thrillers and his psychodramas in a way like a movie like Mother or a movie like Black
Mm-hmm.
Swan sort of plays
Yeah,
out.
I think the way he kind of plays
Tension.
with mood and sort of visual metaphor within narrative, I can see a lot of that. Yeah. Honestly, I thought a lot of Marriage Story, which is not a horror movie at all, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but a divorce movie, and that is sort of like the literal events of a divorce, and this is more like the emotional turmoil that the characters are going through, right? So
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting double feature to end
Mm-hmm.
your relationship with.
Yeah, like that. Like this is the nightmare they have when they
Yeah.
set their head on the pillow from going to divorce court.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is like sort of how it manifests the demons, if you will, uh, into some sort of physicality. But it's you know, Polanski made some similar stuff early on, Rosemary's Baby and Repulsion especially. He's kind of the father of this style of paranoia cinema, but it's really not like anything else. It's
Yeah. Yeah. It is its own monster.
mm. And like I said, I believe I said last week when I assigned it that for a good while it was hard to find uh, a DVD copy of this that wasn't cut. Um, like there was an American cut that was only like 80 something minutes long.
Hmm.
Um, and they like tried to like reshape it to make it more conventional.
Hmm.
And I
That
think
doesn't
that
sound very
was,
good at all.
yeah, I think that's all there was for a while. And then there was a Blu-ray that came out and then was quickly out of print. And for a while, that was like worth like $200 plus. I remember seeing it like on behind the glass case at Amoeba Records. And
Oh.
now it's been put back into print. This version that you can watch on Shudder or AMC Plus. So this is the version that's the new Blu-ray version, which I believe is upscaled for better HD or whatever. But yeah, the movie has a look, it has a style.
Yeah.
It's it's very cold, but
It's sort of hospital sick.
yeah, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. And I think it's interesting that Sam Neill has kind of become this horror actor. You know, if you
No, I
think,
mean, yeah, I mean, he did this. He did In the Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter's. He was in Event Horizon. I don't care what anybody says. Jurassic Park is a horror movie. Like, yeah, he kind of been a trajectory he's always sort of been down. I mean,
mm,
he's done other work as well, but
yeah, there's
you
just
can
certain actors, like I think Jamie Lee Curtis also, like even though she's
mhm,
done the other stuff and she's proven herself, she's sort of embraced by the genre world in a
yeah,
certain
yeah.
way, and so is Sam Neill. Isabelle Adjani, which I want to say the only other movie I've seen her in was Ishtar when we talked about that, and she plays the sort of love interest in that, and which is a
Yeah.
very different kind of role. Um,
Yeah, very, very different.
in this, I
She's
mean,
got range.
yeah, I mean, it's a totally ego death, uh, self emulating kind of performance.
Oh
Which
yeah.
which is why I think she won the Palme d'Or for her performance. Is
Well, and I can also see, like you said, how it would be difficult to shake something like this because it is so internal. It is so emotional. It's so, it's not reliant on dialogue or plot. And so I think as an actor, it's got to be much more challenging to kind of get into a headspace where you can perform something like this. And I'm not even talking about just being like method or whatever, just the physicality of
Doing 17, 18 takes of
of
this type of
you know
stuff.
yeah, of visceral gut screaming and crying and yelling and sweating, and your body still experiences that. Like you still, in a you're at as an actor, like you can, like you still feel it
Hmm.
physically, because your body is doing these things. So even if you are completely emotionally detached from the source, like it's still going to have an effect on you.
Yeah, there's something almost, especially the early scenes between her and Sam Neill, it feels like some sort of like couples scream therapy or something.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and I think that there's elements of that. Like there's nothing about the movie that's naturalistic. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think if you try and watch this movie expecting naturalism or expecting, you know, uh, performances that are expected for modern day characters in certain circumstances, you're going to sort of raise your eyebrows at things. But I think if you sort of again, just sort of let go and let the movie express itself, it's very effective.
Yeah, I
I'm not going to
agree.
say an altogether pleasant experience, but
I feel like you had a harder time shaking this off than me. I don't know. Like I like, I don't know. I felt it and I was like, yeah, that was, but I don't know. I was able to kind of walk away from it.
yeah, I mean, this is the movie I could see again. I don't even necessarily believe in, like, there's all those people who say, "Oh, that's a good movie, but you only see it once." Like, fuck that shit. If it's a good movie, I'll see it again. I don't care.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I don't believe in the you only have to see it once. Um,
Well, I don't believe in that because I have a goldfish memory, and if I haven't seen something repeatedly within 5 years, I have forgotten half the movie.
a lot of the times that's the case with me too, especially after a certain age. But yeah, I think that this would be a movie I would want to see again to get different interpretations of,
Yeah,
um,
because there's
to
so
study
much.
more.
Yeah, there's so much there. It is a really rich movie, and it's really dense, and I'm sure there was a ton of stuff I missed, a ton of details, and I actually had to put the captions on at some point because I had a very hard time understanding Isabelle Adjani. I think her French accent.
French Belgian, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's very thick, and her playing across from Sam Neill, who's the very has this very sort of posh. Well, I think in this he's going for more of a British accent, even though he's New Zealand.
Right.
Um, uh, I found it hard to sort of cut back and forth between them, and I was like, I'm missing a lot of what she's saying. Um, but I think that this movie, as sort of icky emotionally as it is really rich, and there's just a lot of sort of like Kubrickian detail to what's going on in the frame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for the next episode, what do you have for the streaming homework?
My friend and listener of the show, Ted, has been pestering me for at least a year now to get us to watch One Cut of the Dead, a zombie movie that is currently streaming on Shudder.
Uh, yes, and we will be talking about that. And if anybody has anything to say about any of the topics that we talked about on this podcast or previous, you can reach us at our email, MacGuffinPod@gmail.com. You can find us on most social media at MacGuffinPod, all one word. Lists of all of our homework that we've done on Letterboxd, and we are also on Twitter and Instagram primarily. Um, I don't know how involved with TikTok I want to be. I had a bad day on it the other day and deleted it off my phone.
Yeah, I
I think
deleted
I've
Ted.
decided it's like harmful for society and I don't want to be a part of it.
Uh, yeah, no, I agree. I deleted my TikTok a while ago. I still have my account, but I deleted the app because
Yeah,
yeah, I agree. It's
if I upload, I might do it just from my computer, upload clips. So, if you're subscribed to us or you want to look us up, see if we have anything new, we are on all of the podcast apps, including iTunes and Spotify, Google Podcasts. Leave us a star rating and a one sentence review.
5 stars,
Um,
please.
that would be preferred. You can also read the reviews I do for the Idaho State Journal at idahostatejournal.com, arts and entertainment page, or you can just Google Idaho State Journal Arts and Entertainment or movie reviews, and you should find those archived. And you can follow me individually on Twitter and Instagram at VC Cassidy. And be sure to read the other articles and reviews by the rest of the MacGuffin staff at the homepage mcguff.in.
You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Keith Foster Kid. You can also check out my live performances at Mockingbird Improv. I'm a part of the shows Improv versus Stand Up and Lyrics and Laughs. So if you want to come see a show, check out mockingbirdimprov.org.
Okay, and that is the end of the episode.
Yeah. So the first thing you want to do if you see the killer is run. Remember, avoid the knife, keep your life.
Bye.